All right. Thank you everyone for joining us today for the webinar, Are You Ready for a Red Team? My name is Stephen Marshowitz, Director of Program Development here at TrustedSec. And this webinar was really born out of our desire to help you get the most out of your experience with TrustedSec. The team that we'll be talking to today saw an increase in demand to move really past the traditional penetration testing to a more advanced assessment that better mirrors the real world of attacks. They wanted to make sure that if you were thinking about it, when might be the right time to do so, and how could you best prepare to maximize the value for you and the organization. So really looking forward to it today. First, a few housekeeping items. This will be recorded and you will be able to download it after we finish up today. It'll be available on our YouTube, and then also reminder to ask questions. You can either ask them in the Q&A or in the chat. Also, we will have a white paper coming up, which I'll talk to in a second. Or we have a white paper if you haven't seen it yet. But at TrustedSec, our tagline really is to evolve beyond threats, which has a twofold meaning. First, we constantly strive to stay ahead of threats and threat agents. And through our leading attack intelligence research team, the TrustedSec Research Unit, we've created several de facto tools in the security industry, and really are proud of those and how they're really helping the different organizations and folks out there trying to gain a better experience with security. And secondly, when we talk about evolving beyond threats, we align that information with the regulations and risk to the business. We seek to provide more value than anyone else to build your security posture in the most cost-effective way. In looking at the full cycle of your program, we can help with building your program, testing your program, fixing it, which has been really on the upswing lately, especially with so many changes to your environments, and then finally responding to any incidents and making sure that we do that in a full life cycle management. And the point of TrustedSec is really about the people. That's where it all starts. And what we've done is we've really inverted the model where the vast majority of our consultants are senior leaders, and many are really industry leaders in what they've been able to give back to the industry itself. So we also wanted to mention, again, that supplemental Red Team guide. So it is on our website currently if you'd like to go download it. But right after this presentation, we'll be sending the link out along with the replay, so you won't have to go behind the gates or anything like that. And then we'd also, at the conclusion, if you would like, we offer a free Red Team preparedness consultation. So really give you a chance to further your learning around this and really dive in deep and see if this is the right time for you to take on a Red Team. So with that, let me introduce our presenters today from our Innovation Research and Advanced Testing team, Justin Elze and Jason Lang. Justin, if you could start us off and tell us a little about yourselves.
Sure. So I'm Justin Elze. I'm the Director of Research and Advanced Testing at TrustedSec. On the Red Team side of things, I handle initial scoping and planning with clients, working through concerns, setting up everything for success. I'm also joined by Jason Lang, who's a senior consultant on the Red Team. He'll be leading the presentation from his side. Jason?
Awesome, thanks, Justin. As Justin mentioned, I'm a senior consultant at TrustedSec, and what that really means is that I do Red Team operations for our Red Team. Thank you all for joining. Good morning or afternoon, wherever you are. We're going to get into the Red Team preparation slides, but first, just a few definitions, a couple of quick facts about us on the Red Team. You're going to hear me use terms like Adversarial Attack Simulation. At TrustedSec, that is what we call our Red Team engagements, and really it's the conducting of precision attacks against an organization. It's not necessarily laying waste with pen test tools, although there are moments when that happens. But we're very, very focused on taking more of a surgical approach to achieving specific targets. And we'll get into how we do red teaming and setting goals and setting the scope and things like that, and making sure that you all are as prepared as you can be for either going into a red team engagement or trying to make sure that you are ready possibly as an organization for a red team engagement. Just a little bit about the TrustedSec Targeted Operations Team, formed in 2017, and right now we have Justin as our leader, and there's 7 of us that do operations. And I do want to talk just a little bit, probably to everyone's chagrin, but just a little bit difference between pen testing and red teaming. And I understand the industry is loaded with, you know, all kinds of information about these kinds of differences. And the truth is that a lot of them are relevant. This is how we differentiate red team from pen testing. Number one, the engagements are goal driven as opposed to vulnerability driven. The main goal behind any red team assessment is really to assess defensive and defensive capabilities, as well as to generate remediation work. When I'm doing a pen test, if I'm on like a standard, you know, 5 business day pen test, I'm firing all the lasers all the time. And on a red team, things change a little bit because we are always going after goals or targets. And that changes the game a little bit because that is, in our opinion, a little more real world in terms of what an adversary is going to do. Is an adversary going to get into your network and just start password spraying, you know, Active Directory? Probably not. What are they going to be going for? They're going to be going for things like data. They're going to be going for things like documents. They're going to be trying to figure out where your SQL databases are, a lot of recon. I tell a lot of my clients that I would say probably 70 to 75% of my time on a red team engagement is spent doing internal reconnaissance, not firing exploits, not, you know, sending port scans. It's just looking at documentation, it's looking at data, it's looking at SharePoint, it's trying to get my bearings. And normally by the time I'm done, I'm on pretty intimate terms with the client network. Okay, but all of that is done in favor of trying to achieve a goal. On red teams, we prioritize stealth over speed. Again, and I kind of talked about this, but stealth meaning that we use tools that are not released. It means that we research commands and IOCs to make sure that if we do tip our hand, it's intentional, or it's just kind of a mistake because mistakes happened. And I'm sure every red team operator on this call has experience with screwing up an operation or getting caught because they've done something or run a command before they knew everything that command was going to do, or what the detective capabilities were on the part of the client. Okay, and last, like I said, on red teams, we'll probably use tools that the client hasn't seen. In fact, I can guarantee we'll use tools that the client hasn't seen. We have quite a battery of unreleased tools, and why? You know what? There's like a whole debate about OSTs and things like that. I'm not going to go in that direction, other than to say that when you are up against a real adversary, that adversary is going to bring capabilities that you may not be prepared for. And that is what we are trying to do with using certain tools in the environment, is to give you IOCs that you have never seen before, IOCs that might not match up cleanly to a MITRE ATT&CK category ID, you know, things like that, because that's the point, is to have an encounter with an unknown adversary. The nice thing about a red team is that you're doing it with a safety net, because we have the best interests of the defense as well as the company in mind. So let's talk about how to prepare. The very first thing before going into a red team assessment is to make sure that you know what your goals are. Okay, and when I say goals, I'm not just talking about, yeah, we want to get better at security. That is a good goal. I'm talking very specific goals for the red team to achieve, because the red team test process is really about goal-driven testing. Okay, and when I say goals, I'm talking about client-defined trophies that act as the goal for the whole thing. Okay, and when I say, the reason why I listed this as number one is because it is number one. When we get a list of goals, everything that is done on the red team, from trying to break into a building to trying to acquire credentials to doing internal reconnaissance, everything that we do is in effort to achieve those target trophies, because at the very end, we write up very lengthy assessments about how we achieve those targets. An average, you know, red team assessment, just the narrative might be between 30 to 60 pages of, you know, here's how we achieve this goal, we were not able to achieve this goal, et cetera, et cetera. Everything is focused on the goal. And examples for your information, example might be sensitive data to get access to a particular server, things like that. What we do not necessarily like to see as goals is go for domain admin. If we have to get domain admin, we will, but understand that that's not necessarily the best goal. And what I normally tell my clients when I say, okay, what goals do you have for us? And there's normally a pause on the call. And I'll say, all right, think about it this way. What would put you in the news on CNN if this data left your organization and was published to Pastebin? And then immediately I start getting answers. That's what we're looking for. Okay, if I have to get DA, I will get DA in effort to get the goal, but that should not be the goal in and of itself. Okay. And then lastly, test phases, such as, like I said, external or social engineering or things like that. Those are all chosen in effort to achieve the specific goal. And it's okay to say things like, well, a goal might be, to social engineer a user in this department. That's a fine goal. We can try that if that's something that you want to be tested on. And then just a brief word about testing phases. All testing phases, again, support the trophies. And this is important because this defines what we can and can't do. And I got a whole section on scope that I'll talk about in just a little bit. But when I say phases, this is really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the OSINT phase, the external phase, any application testing, any social engineering that could include all kinds of SE, as well as internal testing that might include a perimeter breach or a physical test or an assumed breach. And we'll talk about all this in just a little bit. But I did want to give you an example. I worked with a client this year that gave me this list of goals. And I hold this up as an example because this is a fantastic list of goals. There is kind of the obligatory get DA on the first one, but then it's like, okay, figure out what our password database is and go get that and see if you can view plain text passwords. Can you get into our Salesforce environment? Can you get into our office security camera system and see if you can view confidential information? What about AWS? Can you get into AWS? I had one client who said, a goal is we want to see if you can smuggle a comment into production source code. Those are fantastic goals. And we understand and we take very seriously the trust that this places on the red team. We have to know, in order to do this job, you kind of need to know a lot about a lot in terms of systems, because one of our goals is never to take down a system ever under any circumstance. We as attackers, we need those systems online so we can take the data. So taking down the system obviously does not help. All right, so setting goals, that is definitely number one. Number two is to determine the scope. And scoping is also extraordinarily critical. As every operator knows, you do not stray outside the bounds of the scope because that's important. But what does scope mean on a red team? Scoping is really just part of a trifecta, which is planning and communication, which I would argue that the communication side of things is one of the most important things that you can do to successfully get every dime out of the money that you are putting into a red team assessment. They're expensive, and they're expensive for a reason, because an awful lot of work goes into tailoring the assessment and making sure that you're getting very specific information to your environment. However, the communication angle and the follow-up that happens after a red team is really where so much value takes place. And quite honestly, it's one of my favorite parts of the engagement. But when I say scope, I'm talking about in-scope assets, and we'll talk more about the specifics of scoping in just a second, but it also includes things like the duration of the engagement, when we start, when we stop, things like that. The planning phase must include deconfliction planning. All right, and the reason why I say this is because normally not many people are in the know about a red team assessment that's going to be taking place. And if we don't plan for deconfliction, I have seen entire engagements come off the rails, or worse, get canceled because a certain manager didn't know that this was happening. They didn't like the fact that they were being tested. Everything comes off the rails, and now we're just burning money. And that's not a good place to be. At TrustedSec, we are, how shall I put this, fierce guardians of the value of the engagement. We know that there's a lot of money on the line. Everyone wants to get every dollar they can out of the engagement, and we want that for you. And so making sure that we plan for deconfliction is critical. Making sure that, and when I say plan, not just we have a vague idea. I'm talking about putting text down in an email that we agree on and say, okay, when this happens, we're going to do this. When this happens, we're going to do that. And I have a whole lot more information for you guys about that, because it's critical to keep the engagement going and moving in a smooth direction. All right, planning also includes making sure that we know which phases are allowed, which ones are not. If there's going to be a phase that normally gets excluded, it's physical, and especially in the COVID era, we understand, do understand that on the physical side of things, it's a very, very successful means of getting in, especially now. In fact, I would argue you should be testing physical now because nobody's in the building. But anyways, I digress. By the way, I do see the question. I will do my best to come back around to questions at the end. So like Steve posted in the chat, keep throwing your questions out there, and I will come back to them at the end, promise. And then communication, making sure that the client knows that they can reach out to me at really any time is important on a red team, because I might work in the middle of the night if I think that's going to be, if that is going to get me on track toward the target, I will absolutely do that. And normally I give clients my direct cell phone number, and I'm like, all right, pull me up on Signal, or pull me up on WhatsApp or whatever, and ask your questions. And I have clients reach out to me frequently that way when they want instant feedback from me about what's happening. And normally it's a lot of "is this you" type stuff, which is fine, because I'm happy to answer that. And the one thing that's really important that I should address regarding communication is ensuring that the team that is in the know on this, and I have a whole section on what we call the need to know team. In fact, I think that's coming up next. Making sure that the team that is in the know all has the best interest of the engagement in mind. This can get tricky when there is somebody on the team that wants to win at all costs. They're gonna shut me down at every turn. This is where communication can get tricky, because we understand that if we tip our hand sometimes too much to the wrong person, we get shut down. What happens? The engagement comes off the rails, and now again we're back to burning money. Not necessarily a good thing, and there's not necessarily a whole lot we can do about that, other than to say, choose your team wisely. And I have a whole section about choosing the right people to be in the know for the engagement, because that's really important as well. But back to scope, determining the scope. When I say the word scope, here's exactly what I'm referring to. I'm referring to the people, process, and technology that we are allowed to target. Okay, and that's not it. I'm also referring to the tactics that we are allowed to use, because not every tactic gets used on every red team. I would love it if we could use all the tactics all the time, but sometimes that's not necessarily the goal of the assessment. Sometimes people don't want their wireless tested. Sometimes people don't want to do an assumed breach. They just want us to fish all day long and see if we can get in that way. Sometimes people don't want physical attacks because they were tested on it 6 months ago and they know that they have work to do. And those are entirely valid reasons, all of them. And so making sure that we agree on the tactics that can be used, that's important, okay? And then the timing of the attacks. Again, there are some attacks that we like to do during business hours, some attacks that we don't want to do during business hours. For example, if I want to RDP out to a user's workstation, I'm much more likely to have success with that after hours because I'm not going to kick them off their session. And so, there's definitely good reasons for doing attacks outside of business hours, but there are some instances where it's like, okay, you can't talk to this machine during this time because it's being used for this thing, and that's fine. But making sure that we know that is really important. So bringing it all kind of back full circle, when I say scope, I mean more than just a list of IPs. If you're used to being pen tested, then you're used to having the tester say things like, all right, send me a list of external IPs and internal IPs, and that's my scope. When it comes to a red team, that is still true. However, there's more that comes into it because we're looking holistically at all of your processes. So how do you get the most value out of scope? I'll say this, keep the scope as open as you can. And when it comes to reducing scope, be very, very careful what you exclude. And the reason why I say that is because let's say that you give us a goal. You want us to get into your main banking database. Okay, great, good goal. But you exclude all of the bankers' machines from scope because they're keeping the business up and running. Okay, I understand why you do that. You don't want us to take down your systems. Makes sense. However, understand and trust me when I tell you, we are very good at not taking down systems, and any competent red team that you would work with should be good at not taking down systems because, like I said previously, we need these systems to be online. There's only one instance that I can recall where a tester took down a system unknowingly because they actually discovered a 0-day accidentally in the application itself, and they basically just DOSed the application, went offline. That was like the tester had no idea and could have no idea necessarily what was going to happen in that instance. However, just believe me when I tell you, we gained very little by things like shutting down systems. At worst, I might want to issue a reboot to a system if I'm going to trigger a payload of some sort. However, I normally talk to my point of contact and just say, hey, I want to reboot this. Is that okay? I'm not just going to go, willy-nilly and start firing down shutdown commands on all these systems. That's just not how we work. Okay. So be careful when it comes to excluding things from scope. This also includes excluding people. When you want to get excluded from things like social engineering, I worked with an organization that they did a lot of trading and wanted to exclude all of their traders. And I'm like, you can do that, but just understand, when you exclude all your traders, that means if I get their password via some accidental means, I don't get to use it. It means I stay away from their workstation, even if their workstation is vulnerable. And the point being that I'm trying to come around to with this is that everything that gets excluded from scope has the potential to reduce the value of the engagement, because it restricts me from going in a direction that a regular attacker might go. So we totally understand why things want to get excluded from scope, because you are very concerned about maximizing uptime. Totally get it. Makes all the sense in the world. Just understand that we know how to perform the assessment while safeguarding your data and the systems at the same time. I'll give you, there's a caveat that I have to give. Red teaming and pen testing and any kind of offensive security engagement is just as much art as it is science. And so if I'm firing something and I don't necessarily know how it's going to work, best practice is to reach out and say, I'm targeting the system. Am I good to target the system? There is potential of X, Y, and Z. We know when that threshold occurs where it's like, there's a little bit of risk here. And so, if there's a risk to availability, we almost always reach out. So, point being is that we do our dead level best to ensure that everything stays online all the time. And then last, when it comes to scope recommendations, be sure that you budget enough time for a red team. I've had this happen where I've had engagements come in. It's like, all right, Jason, here's a 2-week red team. And I'm like, really? Okay. I mean, it's kind of more like a 2-week pen test, but okay. And when that happens, I have to set expectations on the call. I have to say things like, all right, listen, I got 1 week or I got 2 weeks. Stealth is not going to be a big focus. And I have to put that out there because if a target is given and I have to try and achieve that target inside of 2 weeks, the less time I have, the more noise I have to make, the faster I have to move, the more mistakes I'm likely to make, and the more I'm likely to get detected. So be sure to budget enough time. And again, on I would say an average red team engagement, and this is loose here, but Justin can speak to this better than I can. But an average red team engagement, at least for the ones that I worked on, are around 6 weeks. The one I'm on right now is 8 weeks, and I think I got another 6 to 8 weeks coming up after that. And so, point being, make sure that enough time gets budgeted, because one of our jobs is to make sure that every minute on the red team gets maximized. So during the kickoff call, we will plan this out with you. We'll say things like, all right, the first few days is going to be spent doing the open source intelligence gathering. I'm going to be looking at things like LinkedIn. I'm going to be looking at things like Pastebin and GitHub, all those things to try and pull together some information. And then I'm going to be testing your perimeter at least as much as I can. Then I'm going to be focusing on social engineering. And if this doesn't happen by this time, then I want to do this and I want to do this. Like, for example, assume breach. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Point being is that there's a point in the engagement at the beginning where the operator is kind of a project manager, or I'll be like, I will put down dates and say, if this doesn't happen, if we don't achieve this milestone by this time, then we're going to pivot and do this. And because that is all done to try and maximize the value and keep the engagement going on track. Okay? Scope recommendations. All right, number 3, determine the need to know team. Also very important. Again, as I've mentioned, I've seen whole engagements come off the rails because the right person was not included. So what is the need to know team? The need to know team is individuals who are privy to the timing and details of the test. They know they're being tested. They know what the dates are. They know TrustedSec is performing it. They know who I am. They have my contact information. They can get a hold of me if they need to, okay? And they also form the decision-making body. They are responsible for establishing the goals. They're responsible for establishing the scope. And generally there's kind of, one person who is, takes the lead point, and that is really the person that I'm working with. And they're also included on all testing communications, including technical stuff. Somebody reaches out and says, hey, I see weird traffic coming from this IP. Is this you? And then I'll respond back to that. Okay. Getting the need to know team right is really important, because getting the need to know team wrong can have serious consequences on the test and on the value of the test. So here's what I recommend. All right. The ideal need to know team, and I know that some people might disagree. The ideal need to know team would comprise of these individuals. And one, you're going to have the CISO on there, or whoever the equivalent manager is. Pertinent individuals from the security audit team, if you have a security audit team, and if the security audit team is especially the sponsor of the test. Frequently, I work with security auditors, and they're always on the need to know team. And so this can be useful if they get included, because this might satisfy an audit requirement. So reaching out proactively can be a good thing. I understand that audit folks can sometimes get a bad rap from like the IT folks. I get those dynamics, but normally it's a good thing to involve audit. If you are being tested on physical, please, you must involve the building owner and the manager, especially if you are not the building owner or manager, or it's owned by a third party. I'm sure you all recall some red team operators getting arrested recently because the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. That's bad. And we do not want to go to jail, obviously. So make sure that the building owner is involved if physical is included in scope. And last but not least, probably the most important member, and probably the most controversial member, is the SOC manager. Ensuring that the SOC manager is on the team is critical. And this is a hill that I will die on. And I understand that there might be some disagreement here, but I have had way more success with internal political issues and having deconfliction being handled properly when the SOC manager knows what's happening. And when I say the SOC manager, I'm not talking about the SOC staff, like the analysts. They should not know. The SOC manager should know, and should know that a test is happening. Why? Because the SOC manager can then say, if and when an incident bubbles up or detection takes place, and the analyst starts looking into it, and the analyst is like, oh shoot, we're getting hacked, data's leaving, a CrowdStrike alert comes in and says, some lateral movement activity via WMI took place on the system. Analyst starts looking into it, they start to panic, they want to re-image the machine. The SOC manager says, hold on, we probably don't have to re-image the machine. Normally when I recommend that the SOC manager tips the hand to a red team is when the analyst or when other management wants to take destructive action. All right, they want to start re-imaging, they want to start rebooting, they want to start doing things like that. I'm like, easy does it. Okay, we don't necessarily have to do that. And I've even had SOC managers that are on the need to know team that say, Jason, we want to re-image this machine. Should we re-image the machine? And what I will do is I will disclose and say, okay, to undo what I did, here's the step. Delete this registry key, delete this file. If you do those two things, then the machine is clean from what I did. Now it's your decision if you want to reimage the machine or not. If you want to follow the standard process, that is totally up to you. But I have seen tremendous value come from an analyst chasing down some of my actions. And then number one, figuring out that either figuring out that it was a red team, or not figuring it out and wanting to contain the explosion, so to speak, via reimaging or isolating them on a VLAN or something like that. And the SOC manager has a critical role to play. And what's worse is that the SOC manager is I would argue it's so important that this is the area where I see engagements come off the rails, because if the SOC manager doesn't know, and analysts start doing they start analysting, and then they're like, hey, I want to reimage this machine. The SOC manager's like, yeah, reimage it, because that looks like a legit attack. And now we have data loss, and we got an employee out of work, all because if they knew about it, they could have put the brakes on it. So please include the SOC manager. That one's important. All right. And lastly, choose a single point of contact to interface with the red team. And this is really just from our convenient standpoint. I'm happy to, reply all to the need to know team with answers and things like that. But just pick one and have them interface with us. Normally, this is like security audit team or the auditor that we're working with. And one final note about auditors: if you are an auditor, I understand the temptation and the desire to not include any of these other people because you want to do an audit because you're testing them. I get it. Just understand and have some precautions in place. If you decide to exclude them, engagements can come off the rails if the right people don't know, and then destructive action is taken. Egos can get inflamed. I've seen that happen before as well. And it's normally an unpleasant situation when people do not include the right folks on the team. So this is my ideal list. This list that I'm giving you right here, this is where I see the most success on engagements and the smoothest engagement. When one or more people is excluded, that's normally when it can get ugly. So anyway, number 4, plan the assumed breach. This is important. I want to make, and this kind of comes back to, what I talked about before, but we also want to make sure that everything in this presentation that we're giving you is tangible advice, okay? These are all things that if you plan them out right, then you're going to find that the engagement just kind of flows, and it's a really, really pleasant experience for everyone all around. But when I say assume breach, what am I talking about? I'm talking about allowing the red team internal access if all external attempts have failed. Okay, we tried brute forcing and got no creds. All of your portals are secured with multi-factor authentication. Social engineering attempts have failed. Everything is up to date. Basically, it's 2 or 3 weeks into a 6 or 8 week red team, and so far I've gotten nowhere. Okay, now what? What would you like me to do? Do you want me to continue down social engineering road, because that's really what's going to continue happening? I'm going to keep sending fishes. I'm going to do more research on your employees. I'm going to dig into their lives a little bit more and see if I can make things a little more tailored for them, or we can move to an assumed breach. And normally I would say, 95+% of the time, the organization that I'm working with wants to test their internal security. It's great that external security is buttoned up. However, lots and lots of organizations now they're running vulnerability scanners against the perimeter daily, if not at least weekly. All those vulnerabilities get buttoned up. Everything stays up to date. They're rolling out 16-character password policies all over the place now. It's fantastic. Okay, but making sure that we can continue to do the work of trying to achieve the goal is that's effectively what an assumed breach is. There are 3 methods that I want to talk about, and I had this conversation with every single client on the kickoff call. Okay, but I described these 3 methods, and I'm like, here's what I would do in your situation. Okay, the methods in order of preference. Number 1, the trusted insider method. This is a non-IT user. Read that again, non-IT user selected to work with the red team to run payloads, provide information. I might ask them for their password. They are my insider. They're my person inside the organization that's going to do what I tell them to do. They're going to run what I tell them to run, and they're going to tell me what I need to know. Okay, because they're an insider. The reason why I say non-IT is because I will use whatever access you give me. If you give me admin rights to everything, well, that's going to make my job easy. If you set it up in such a way that I have access to nothing, that's going to make my job a lot harder, and I would question how realistic it is. With a trusted insider, the operator gets to use the user's context and demonstrate what is accessible via the user's context. And this can reveal a whole host of things that the organization didn't know about. For example, I just came off of an 8-week red team. We used a trusted insider. I worked with the insider. They're like, yep, user doesn't have admin rights anywhere. I was like, okay, great. And what I found out was that the user had read and write access to all of the other users' home directories. They had forgotten all about this. This is like job transfer security. User moved from one department to the other, and the access followed them. And what did I do? I used that and was able to achieve goals that way because that access had either been forgotten about or was excluded, from an audit or something like that. But point being is that when I get to use the user's access, that is the most realistic, because that also simulates a successful social engineering attempt. I might send a user a payload, a trusted insider a payload, and say, hey, run this, and it gets run. I did this with an organization recently. I ran a payload on machine. CrowdStrike pops up. It's like, hey, shoot, this is evil. Well, what happened? The SOC whitelisted it. They're like, this looks okay. SOC whitelisted the payload. And so what I do, ran the payload again, and it worked. So point being is that having that trusted insider provides a very realistic scenario. Okay. Number two, device implant. This is something that it simulates a physical intrusion where we get a device on the network. And our devices are special because they are NAC aware and they know what to do if NAC is encountered. I haven't seen this a whole lot in the offensive security industry, but we do have these devices. I have tested with them many times myself. They work very well at kind of moving, let's just say they kind of move around NAC, in kind of a loose way. And then last is the spare laptop. This is when a laptop gets stood up, domain credentials get put on it, generally a new user and a new laptop are provisioned. This is the least preferred means because it's the least realistic. That's what we want with assumed breach. We want realism, okay? The recommendation for myself, go with options 1 and 2 because that way you get more coverage on the test and we can work faster. If I have 2 devices under my control, I can work faster than if I have 1 device under my control. And so you will allow us and empower us to try and achieve the goals a little bit faster that way. Okay, number 5 is plan for detections. This is also highly important. When you're planning for detections, what happens if the blue team figures it out? All right, we're 50% of the way into the time. Blue team gets a detection. They're like, this looks interesting, and they start doing their analysis. They figure out that it was an attack. They're like, I want to reimage the machine. The SOC manager tips the hand and says, nope, it's a red team. Don't reimage. We're 50% of the way through the engagement. What happens now? What if they detect a device that got put on the network? Does the engagement stop? And the answer is absolutely not. These are incredibly valuable moments. And in fact, I would argue they are some of the most valuable moments because when it comes to preparing for a red team, one of the questions I get asked most frequently is our organization ready for a red team? Are we mature enough for a red team? And here's normally my stock answer. How long have you been doing penetration testing? If the answer is, a couple of years, I would say, okay, do you do externals and internals? Yep. Do you have a SIM? Do you got something like Splunk or QRadar or something? Yep. Are you aggregating events? Yes. Are you aggregating 4688s? And that question is normally like, well, which event is that? And I'm like, that's the one where it is doing process creation. Do you see, are you bringing in the command line parameters as well? Yes, we are. I'm like, okay, you are probably ready. If you've done a few purple team engagements or defensive engagements, you've built up your detections, yes, you are ready for a red team. And I say that kind of as I'm painting with a broad brush here because I know every organization is different. But normally the biggest value in these engagements comes from working with the defense directly. Specifically, the defense detects something and now they start sniffing the trail. This is some of the best parts of the engagement because they actually get to test a determined, skilled intruder, which they don't get to see every day. And this is definitely some of the more fantastic moments. It kind of stinks for me because it means I got caught, but that's the name of the game, right? So again, very valuable moments. You should know how and when to react when this happens, and this means planning for detections. If there are no detections, and we've gotten all the trophies, then feel free, drop an email, say, hey, there's 2 weeks left. Can you run this attack and this attack and this attack? Yes. Or can you run Bloodhound-C all, and just like spray the network? Yep, I can do that too. I can revert into pen test mode and tip the hand. And that way, that will, number one, it will indicate to the defense that yes, there's an intruder in the network, but it will also allow me to work with them directly and say, hey, how about if we try and shore up this area? Or I'm going to try this attack and let's see if we can actually get a detection built around it because here's the IOCs. I'll shoot them a link, a non-phishing link, sadly, but I'll shoot them a link that says, hey, here's an article that describes exactly what I'm going to do. Let's see if we can piece this together. And I'll work directly with them. And that's honestly some of the best moments of the engagement. Okay, so recommendations for and this is, I got a whole other article regarding this. I'm going to link you guys to, but I'm going to give you a high level. For an external detection, I'm doing a password spray against an NTLM authentication endpoint. Follow your standard operating procedure. You want to block an IP, block an IP. You want to block a domain, block a domain. You want to, I don't know, take something offline, that's okay. If you think that there's an attack coming in from an external part of the perimeter, just follow whatever your standard operating procedure is. You are not going to stop me if you block my IP. That is just fine. I will not ask you to whitelist me And I would argue any red team that wants you to whitelist an external IP, that might be, anyway, I would question that. But yeah, from an attack standpoint, follow your SOP. Number two, on internal detections, go ahead and allow the analysis to take place up to the point of destructive action. Okay, this is where I'm like, guys, we don't have to go down that road. I just had, a call not too long ago where a client wanted to do a reimage on a machine, and I'm like, you can if you want, but you don't have to. Here is exactly how to undo what I did. And they're like, oh, I just have to delete this. Yep, you just have to delete that. I promise that's all I've done. We are here for you. We're not here against you. So, I will definitely tip the hand if it comes to that moment. For physical detections, note the detection, leave the device in place. Okay, so testing can continue. If you rip the device out, I understand. However, I would make the case that we've effectively transitioned into assumed breach at that point. So I would just leave the device up and running, and then go ahead and follow along with me. I've had clients put, a tap on my network device to see what I'm doing. Fine. If you want to see that to that level, go right ahead. And then last, this is generally a good rule of thumb. If you're not sure what else to do in terms of all these other detections, a good rule to just go by is once we've achieved access, leave the access in place until the end of the engagement. This is not because we're trying to just, strong arm you into giving us what we want. No, that's not the point. The point is to achieve the target, show you how we would achieve the target, and then work to build up your defenses. The reason why I put this in here is because every engagement is time boxed. And that's just the nature of the industry, right? And even if you had an internal red team, they're probably going to be operating on a larger time box, but a time box nonetheless. And again, so if we have 8 weeks, right around, I would say 40 to 50% of the way through the engagement, that's when we would be pivoting to assume breach, and then that access would effectively stay in place. So, and like another example of this, something like leaving the access in place. Hey, we noticed you're using this password for a service account. We want to change it. Okay, you can change that, but understand, don't do it as a reaction. In other words, don't just react because you saw me authenticate with a service account that has a password that's 8 years old and you don't know what else it's being used for. You're taking a lot of risk. What I would recommend, leave the service account password in place, let me continue using it, take down a note for a project at the end that says, hey, we really should rotate all of our old service account passwords. That is the better way of going about it, and it's the least intrusive way of dealing with a vulnerability like that, okay? So as I come to a close, I wanted to leave you with some of this, some recommended reading is Handling Detections on a Red Team. There's an entire blog post that goes into detail about what I just covered in one slide. So if you call us up and Jason, I want to get a red team with you, I'm going to give you this link and I'm going to make it mandatory reading because I do not want to enter into an engagement where we have not planned for what happens when detections take place. Because the truth is detections are getting better. If you work defense on an organization and you've invested in good security practices, good group policies, good security products, those detections are getting better. And so we have to plan for that. We have to make sure that we have a plan on the record to handle that. And then last is the red team preparation guide. This is what Steve had mentioned earlier. Included in that guide is a preparation checklist that we put together to help you just check off the items and say, here, yes, we are ready. No, we're not ready. And you can go out there and download the entire PDF to go through that. It's just more of an in-depth detail of this presentation as well. So with that, coming to the end, I will turn it back over to Steve, who I think is going to facilitate questions. By the way, please do keep dropping questions in. And we will we'll be sure to get those addressed.
Exactly. Perfect. So first question, how do you log red team events to use to deconflict?
All right. So this is Justin. So normally all of our tooling, we take very, very detailed logs. So anytime we upload a file to disk, we have the hash. All of our network communications are logged. Any redirectors, things like that are logged. So normally what will happen is a client will call us, say, hey, we see this file hash, we see this domain, and we know, instantly if it's something that's ours or if they should investigate, it's some outside attacker or something like that.
Okay, great. When would it make sense to do both a pen test and a red team, or would a red team suffice?
So normally from our point of view, a pen test generally is about coverage. So, you have, 2,000 internal IP addresses. We want to try to touch, all of them, see what, ways we can break in, find as much coverage as possible to break in. As you get more and more mature, you have a really competent blue team, you have a SIM, you have EDR products, and you want to start testing the detection and response piece. That's normally when we see clients move over into the red team space. They know that, if they have a traditional pen test, it's going to light everything up. Their EDR is going to fire, their SIM is going to have a billion events. When they want a more targeted attack to kind of see what the flow of an actual attack from something like a phishing email, how that plays out, if they can see it, how far along the path, somebody gets, that sort of thing. So that's usually when we see the transition. Not to say those companies still don't do pen tests. A lot of times there's compliance requirements to do them. They tend to shorten up the pen test and then, add red teaming as a separate effort.
Excellent. What would be the scenario if you were not able to attain the goals?
So I'll take a stab at this, and then I will let Jason take a stab at this. So based on the time of an engagement, we may or may not be able to hit all of the goals. We're always trying to add value. So one of the things Jason, dug into a little bit was if you have a really, really strong perimeter security and really, really strong endpoint security, we might not be able to successfully, break in with a phish or a phishing pretext in 2 or 3 weeks. That's one of the reasons we moved to the assumed breach at a certain point, or at least offer clients the ability to do that. As for not hitting all of the goals, we're working with clients hand in hand the entire time. So whether that be, daily status updates or weekly updates to kind of adjust, our targeting as we go. Jason, you have anything to add?
Yeah, like from my perspective, if I know I'm not going to be able to achieve all of the targets in the allotted time, what I'll do is I'll talk to the client and say, hey, can you prioritize these for me? I think I can probably reach out and go for 1 or 2. Might be able to hit more, but if you had to direct me in a single direction, what would it be? And they know the environment, they know their systems, and so I will always get back a good answer on a question like that. Target our sales system, target our banking system, go for our engineering drawings or diagrams or things like that. And so frequently, that's what I'll do if I realize that we might be coming to the end. But I will say it's somewhat rare that we're not able to achieve any of the targets. I'm struggling to recall an assessment where we got like no targets whatsoever. So normally, like if I get back, or if I get a top 3 and I can achieve 1, I'll reach out for 2, and then if it doesn't happen, what I will do is I will write up all of the strengths, and I'll do that in either case. But if I get detected all over the place and I get shot down all over the place, that all goes into the report, because at that point, I'm all about making the client look good, to the auditor, because it's like, they did a fantastic job, and if that happens, then I don't hide that stuff. It's not an ego thing. It's about testing defenses and making defenses better. And if the defenses are fantastic, then I'll absolutely put that in the report and shining gold star for the day kind of thing.
Excellent. Regarding your planted device that goes around NAC, does it simply fake its MAC address, or is it also capable of getting around 802.1x?
So the devices we deploy on our physical engagements to get around NAC actually use a true 802.1x bypass. The drop boxes also have a cellular card, so we basically get into the box like that, and it's riding the authentication of the device behind it. So your standard 802.1x bypass.
Okay, great. How about a scenario where the end user laptop with AV, EDR, EPM, web proxy, and SOC logs ingesters? What would be your approach?
So I would say that looks like an endpoint, a standard endpoint we would go up against. in most client environments. So normally we would try to come up with, what EDR product they're using, what proxy solution they're using. We have a very strong research team that has a good handle on most EDR products, what payloads have the most success of firing, and build a phishing campaign around that. As of late, we've had a lot of good luck with phone phishing combined with email phishing to, coerce users into running something. But we spend a significant amount of time and research, building tools that can operate in highly monitored environments. So using things like Windows API, knowing what specific payloads can get around an EDR product, things like that.
Okay. Would it make sense to do a blue team defensive countermeasures guidance after the red team? Or how best could they be helped with the findings from your perspective?
So we offer, a blue team offering and a purple team offering. A lot depends on the client's maturity level and how comfortable they are, digesting a red team report from us. So we have some clients that have, subject matter experts in whatever their SIM is, whether it be Splunk or something else. They can take a report from us and, in a couple of days, they'll write some very thorough detections. We have other clients that aren't quite there yet. So they'll have us come in afterwards and they'll have us go through a report. So for example, if we use something like Kerber roasting to get, SPN hashes, they might have us come and put hands on a SIM and help write some more specific and better rules for their environment.
You mentioned about the point of contact being sort of like the PM. How much time should they plan to invest and how interactive should they be?
So that's usually dependent upon each engagement. So we have some engagements. It tends to be there's more hands-on when the first couple times they've done an engagement like this. As time goes on, or they're more comfortable with it, or their blue team is more mature. Some companies tend to be hands-off, and there's some initial guidance at the beginning of an engagement, and then maybe a weekly or bi-weekly status meeting. If it's a company's first time doing something like this, the cadence might be a little bit quicker.
Any guidance around physical assessments in COVID at the moment or even in the foreseeable future? Any recommendations to put the assessed entity organization at ease?
So from our point of view, the majority of our clients have declined doing any physical testing right now for two reasons. One, nobody wants the liability. If somebody went to get sick from traveling and that side, and we certainly understand that. The other piece is that a lot of offices have everybody working remotely, and they don't see a ton of value in it. We've had some clients have us come out in these times and look at their offices. And for example, they had extra security guards in the lobby taking temperatures and checking everybody's ID. So it made physical, tailgating and things like that at these specific locations extremely hard. So, we're kind of taking everything day to day. As soon as, people start bringing people back to the office, we'll probably see an uptick in it. But right now, we've had a lot of clients just flat opt out of physical testing for, whatever comfort reasons they have, or just because there's nobody in the office and everything's locked up. But as soon as they're ready to go back, we're happy to do that level of testing also.
How much support would I have after the engagement for implementing your remediation recommendations, and for how long?
So normally with TrustedSec, we always look to build a relationship with clients. That's not, we deliver the report with a typical red team, and there's, 3 or 4 outbrief phone calls. So that might be a high level executive call. That might be a technical one to go over the whole report. If, for example, there was a number of issues with Active Directory, we'd have a call with the team that manages that. So from a standard red team report, there's 3 or 4 phone calls to go over those things, a presentation, things like that. When I mentioned partnering, one of the things that we're always happy to do is pick up the phone or answer an email. So if we did a red team 6 months ago and you said, hey, we patched our Citrix Next scaler, you guys found a vulnerability there. We had some more questions about that particular exploit. We're always happy to answer those questions, and it's not something we charge for or anything like that.
I want to echo this. I have personally worked with clients months after the engagement. I have some clients that, the engagement wrapped up, earlier this year, and I'll still get a text from them And when it comes to just answering questions, we're happy to answer questions, and we're an open book with our tradecraft and things like that with our clients. And so to set up another meeting to talk through this or that, I really enjoy that, because it means that I know value is happening in those moments, and the findings are being taken seriously and things like that. So I really do like it when I don't just ship a report and I hear nothing back. I want to hear back, and I want those clients to be like, hey, can you have a meeting with one client of mine comes to particular. I did a meeting that was an executive level summary. I did a meeting that was with the IT staff, and then I did a meeting that was with the security staff. And, I love that. I love talking through those things, because everybody has different sets of questions that pertain to their own jobs. And so when that happens, that's really exciting to me. So I encourage that. And like Justin said, we really are about the relationship. We really are. And so, when clients do that, and, when I have a client, come back to me 4 or 5, 6 months later and be like, hey, remember this from the report? How did you do that? I'm eager to jump on the phone and describe it. Where'd Steve go? Did we lose him?
If Steve's gone, I'll tackle the next question. So the question was, we've seen red team assessments advertised as a way to educate the blue team by reproducing known threats in APT, a bit like the attack framework. You seem to be willing to be more furtive and thought as possible. Do you think it would add value for blue teams to phase 0-day specific C2 and rare PE injections that are harder to monitor? So this kind of runs down the line of emulation versus simulation. If you're looking to purely emulate one-for-one, so say an APT group used a specific attack, the command line parameters were very specific to that attacker, and you just wanted to replay those and make sure your EDR was firing or sim rules were firing, that's an exercise that works a lot better in a purple team test. You can run a bunch of variants of known attacks and see if they trigger an alert. With the red teaming piece, we're looking to simulate a goal-oriented attacker trying to break into your environment. Most of the clients that we do this with, have a fairly mature detection program. So if I used a one-for-one example of a file or an attack that was 6 or 12 months old, most likely they're going to detect it. So we're always constantly researching, new ways to evolve our attacks and find a new twist on them to make our, attacking successful and purely, not signature-based. So we see a lot of clients fall down this trap of writing really strict signatures, and we're able to change, a command line parameter or slightly change a registry key or something to avoid a detection. So we're looking to help clients build detections for things that they might not know about yet, like variants of different attacks and things like that. Jason, you got anything to add?
No, not on that point, but that does go into the next question. I see one from Kelly. When you leverage unreleased tools to accomplish set objectives, how does it benefit a client in setting up defenses when they don't know what they're up against? My answer to that would be that even though you've never seen the tool itself is going to have IOCs, and those IOCs, the indicators of compromise, and those IOCs are going to leave a footprint in the network. And it might not be a footprint that you recognize, but it will be a footprint nonetheless. And controls being what they are, there's kernel hooking in EDRs where you can see low-level commands. There's frameworks that monitor ETW and things like that, where you can see at a very low level what's happening in the operating system. The challenge for the analyst becomes, as you know, how to filter the signal from the noise. And that's really one thing that we are designed to help do, as well as our defensive engagements are designed to help do, is filter out the noise and get straight to the signal of an attack that's actually happening. So I think I understand, what you're getting at with your question. But, I would also counter and say that, there are lots of groups that have tools that you haven't seen before either. So putting you in a position where you have never encountered a particular tool or a particular set of IOCs that don't necessarily fit a category cleanly makes for a good exercise. And it's also why we set the bar somewhat high for doing a red team. We want to make sure that clients have gone through, the process of refining their SIM and refining their detections and things like that.
Another good example of something like this would be lateral movement. So, we have some clients that will build detections for PS exec, WMI, PS remoting, whatever the cool technique of the week is. We've seen other clients take that same approach and go, we know there's always going to be some new lateral technique that's, the new hotness, that sort of thing. They wrote detections saying, we know two workstations should never talk to each other in this environment from these subnets, and wrote some detections like that. So they've kind of stepped back away from the really specific DTP and started looking at behavior. It's kind of the same way with environments. If we used a macro to fish users and you ended up realizing in your environment there's only a very small subset of users that need to use macros, looking at things from a little bit different perspective and then building your detections or your workstation hardening policies around, what should never happen in the environment. That way, when a new technique comes out, some new macro variant that uses, parent process ID spoofing to do injection, you might be able to cut that off earlier because they can't even run a macro or something like that.
Okay, last question is we're up against it. Any experience with clients overseas, or with your experience with clients overseas, what common tech constraints were found on the assessment, if any?
So we work with a lot of companies that are overseas and around the world. No real crazy special requirements. I think the hardest thing for us would be, password cracking and things like that, where there's language barriers and things like that. Jason, you have anything to add to that?
Not necessarily. One interesting thing on the password cracking front is on clients where they have a global presence, one thing that I've noticed is that, at least it's sort of an assumption on my part, but when dealing with users who English might not be their first language, instead of choosing passwords that are in the native language, it's normally like, a company name. And I just noticed this on my most recent engagement as well, where it's a lot of end users in a certain region of the world, chose like just the company name because that was the simplest and easiest way to get a successful password in there. So that's it. It makes for those kinds of metrics are really interesting, from a red team perspective. And we try and call those out and just say, you can choose passwords with other characters and make it convenient for you, things like that.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. Really appreciate it. It was a fantastic webinar from you. Again, reminder to everyone to definitely check out the white paper on the Red Team Preparedness Guide, as well as our next webinar. Make sure you take a look at that as we'll be going through some of the tools, techniques, and what does the research team actually do. So with that, we want to thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.